You found it. Your home for the best content on your favorite team, the Fighting Tigers of LSU. Do us a favor. Subscribe to the channel. Leave your comments below. Be sure to smash that like button. Let's start with the Aaron Anderson news. First decommit from LSU since the Ed Orgeron news that he won't be back. Your reaction when you heard the news about Aaron Anderson?
Well, I wasn't surprised, and not just because they've had a coaching change. And look, from July when they picked up a wave of commitments to get to 15 total commitments to now, they had no new commitments and nobody leave the class. So it had been status quo. Now, once the news actually broke, I said, okay, they're going to end up having some guys naturally look around, and pretty much everyone. And look, I've caught up with between me and Billy and Sonny, most of the kids who are on the commitment list, and everyone's reactions are similar, which is they're learning about it in real time, just like all of us are, talking on the radio or reporting on recruiting or just listening as a fan. We're kind of all living through this in the same day-to-day moments. And Sunday when the news came, a lot of these guys sat down and talked to their parents and said, okay, I'm going to have to look around. What if this new coaching staff is one that I'm not, I don't feel comfortable with for whatever reason, or do I now need to at least explore some of my original options? And the one decommitment, as you noted, was Aaron Anderson. And this is a kid who is dynamic receiver and punt returner, 5'8", 185, a guy out of Edna Carr who is having a really good senior season, Matt. I mean, he's a legit top 150 prospect. And he had said, and he had visited Bama a handful of times, visited LSU a handful of times, and said, I'm 50-50, even though he was committed to LSU. So I think the domino of him dropping and saying, I'm no longer committed, and the whole 50-50 thing is probably an open door for him to move into Alabama's class at some point. At least I won't be surprised if that's where the crystal ball starts to trend. Doesn't come as a big shock. I think if anyone was going to pick a guy who was going to decommit, they would have circled him. But I will note that the news of today, at least, is that Walker Howard is going to go ahead and go through with the pre-planned Notre Dame visit, the one he couldn't do when he got injured and the next day wasn't able to fly up to South Bend. But now that trip is back on for this weekend in their game against Southern Cal.
So what should we make of that Walker Howard news?
Well, he's your five-star quarterback, right? And they don't turn those out in Louisiana very often, so it makes you a bit nervous. And I think if you're Walker, it's sort of kind of easy to understand, and I know it's probably a pressure-packed situation for him, so I'm oversimplifying it to a large degree, but his dad was a quarterback at LSU. He's grown up in Lafayette. His best friend is Jack Besh, who is obviously the go-to guy or one of the go-to guys in this freshman class at LSU right now. He's got lots of friends at LSU. So there was always, I mean, he said it, it's my dream to go to LSU. I want to be a quarterback there. And he had never wavered on that. But even when prior to Ed Orgeron, the announcement of his termination on Sunday, Matt, these guys, they know, they listen to radio. They have other coaches from other schools pointing out that Ed Orgeron's on the hot seat. Well, if you're a quarterback, they're bringing in, a new head coach, a new OC, maybe more so than any position. In my opinion, you're sort of monitoring, okay, are they bringing a transfer quarterback with them? Are they bringing their quarterback commit with them? What is the lay of the land here? So it wasn't surprising to hear, even before the news broke on Sunday, that a couple of weeks ago, Walker was thinking about going to visit Notre Dame. He said, hey, that's been my backup option, if you will. I'd like to at least go see it in person and maybe make an official visit. So I don't think the reaction to the news is surprising. I think it's pretty understandable that he wants to go to LSU, but you've got to at least look around and make sure that, if you get into a spot where you're not totally comfortable with what direction you're going, that you have some sort of plan before you sign in December and then enroll at a school in January.
Shea, can you give us an idea of stylistically what type of coach, if LSU made that hire, it would maybe cause Walker Howard to look elsewhere?
I don't really know if there is one. I think that more so than anything, he's probably doing his due diligence. And, I think his dad would probably encourage him to do that, even as a former LSU quarterback. So I'm not sure I don't see a path right now to where they're hiring someone that Walker wouldn't be on board with for whatever reason. So I'm not pressing the panic button on that one as quickly as anyone else, I would say. I think he's up there with maybe one of the firmest commitments.
Okay. Shea Dixon on Twitter at Shea Dixon, Go 247. Where are the other soft commitments? If LSU fans are looking for another shoe to drop after Aaron Anderson, any names that you'd say, yeah, that guy maybe isn't as solid?
I think you've got to start probably out of state, right? I mean, the in-state guys, that's the attraction of this job, right? Is that if you're at LSU, you can just recruit the in-state guys, and half the years by default, we saw it with Les Miles, you could just have top 5 classes. All you got to do is lock up the state. So those guys often, I think, and it's the rare cases of some guys going to Alabama, and it's the few and far between. So I think a new coach would probably be able to hold things steady, try to close with some of these uncommitted guys. So I'd look into maybe Florida because, look, they've got 9 guys committed from Louisiana, 2 from Florida, 2 from Georgia, 1 from Michigan. Well, obviously we don't know if Greg McMahon's been here, but he's been an excellent special teams coach for LSU. He's got a kicker committed out of Michigan. You would think he's probably knowing I'm going down there to be the next in line after Cade York's going pro. That's a pretty attractive position regardless. So I go into the Sunshine State. They've got a linebacker we caught up with today, and Demaria Tolan, who committed in large part because of Blake Baker. Now he also said, hey, look, LSU's been my dream school. The engineering school's great. It's what I want to do. But Blake Baker was at Miami recruiting. He's now at LSU. That's when I felt it was the perfect fit. So you've got a lot of guys like that who are sort of monitoring, okay, what happens to these staff members? If he's out, who's in? And that means you've got to kind of play a waiting game. Mason Taylor is their tight end commit down in Fort Lauderdale. He would be another, the son of Jason Taylor, and he's got a lot of college options. So I think he would think, man, do I need to look around if the tight ends coach and Coach O may not be there? And all that's understandable. I think one good thing, too, Matt, is your highest-ranked out-of-state commitment is the younger brother of your starting quarterback in Jake Johnson,
Right.
the nation's number 1 tight end. So no one is talking right now about Max not still being here a year from now, and I think that would mean Jake would be set to be here as well.
He's on Twitter at Shea Dixon, Go 247, talking a little LSU recruiting here. So, Shea, fundamentally, or I guess just functionally, how do they continue to operate with Ed Orgeron and the staff in place, knowing they're recruiting for a place they're not going to be next year?
Yeah, it's really tough, right? And look, you're getting into a week from now where is the bye week, and that's when they all go on the road for the first time. That's always been their strategy, is to hold out to the bye week, and now you're going, on visits and at schools where you're carrying sort of that cloud over your head of, and certainly as Orgeron, not going to be here, but these other coaches saying, hey, look, I can't promise you I will be here or won't be here, and that probably goes even for guys like Corey Raymond, right? The guys who have been here the longest and are among the most respected coaches in the conference. You just don't know how things are going to unfold with a new coach. So and I'm not here to do it, but I can't really, there isn't a way to paint a rosy picture of how this is going to go. I think it's understandable that this next month and a half is probably going to be a bit rocky for recruiting. And I think for Scott Woodward, he noted it very briefly, Matt, on Sunday when he met with Ed Orgeron in the media, and he said, doing this right now will help with recruiting. And I think what he meant by that was, they now know, right? And they don't know who the next head coach is, but at least they do know that there's a decision made on Ed Orgeron's future. And I think for a lot of them, and Walker Howard, you can use him as an example, was already looking around to make sure, hey, look, do I have backup options if this does happen? Because they have a pulse on things, and that's just how recruiting goes. So the next month, yeah, it'll be a bit rough. What your hope is that certainly in the short term, like by December or mid-December when the signing period gets here, that you maybe have a coach in place or announced, and you can start to sign at least the bulk of your class and figure out the transfer portal and keep guys there, all that. But maybe more importantly, that you suffer this month and a half, that for the long term, that the hire is going to be one that shifts recruiting in a good direction and shifts the on-field results in a good direction, and all of it sort of pays off from there, and you forget about kind of that bumpy road you had to take to get there.
I got a couple more for you, Shea. Do you have any context for, it's just so infrequent that LSU hires a football coach. They just had incredible stability over the years. But can you give some context for what this might be like, given what other programs have gone through in making a coaching change and how that's gone, especially with the December signing date?
No, and I think we're all not like any real, like for instance, you could say, pick out some other big schools that have had coaching changes. Well, Florida State's just spinning the wheel of it right now, and they're not good on the field either. So It's tough to, make that a parallel. USC lived under the the Helton cloud for a long time where it was affecting recruiting in a negative way, and he wasn't even fired. It was just years of everyone saying he's about to get fired, and that affected their recruiting. I think what you said makes it unique. We haven't experienced an LSU coaching search when even Ed Orgeron, when the early signing period and the transfer portal were such key parts to how you build a team. It used to be February, and you were even hiring NFL coaches when they were done in the playoffs, or you were hiring college coaches even if they made it to the national championship. And there's such now an urgency to get things done in a coaching search earlier. Like, as soon as the season ends or soon thereafter, is the expectation that Scott Woodward is going to announce the hire? I would think that's the hope, right? And we've seen him do it before, but I'm very curious to see how that plays out, because I think that the biggest kind of test here, at least right out of the gates, will be how do you build the roster that is already, and you've talked about it so often, it's been written about, struggling at key spots, losing guys to attrition, in need of a true rebuild, and doing that in very short order with this class, with maybe a few weeks before the signing period or just a couple of months after that to get everything done by February, or to really hit big in the transfer portal over the offseason. None of that's been kind of a part of such a big coaching search at the level of LSU, at least not in the past couple of years. So this will sort of be the litmus test for it, I think.
That's the last thing I wanted to ask about, Shea. And you and I have talked about this on Saturdays on Eagle 98.1 Game Day, but I am interested in your thoughts on what this season, how this season might be unique, given the fact that the Division I Council has approved the new transfer rule, and how that might maybe work to LSU's benefit in this year, this singular year that they're looking for a coach, and they're actually going to get a little reprieve in the transfer portal.
Oh, no doubt. I mean, it couldn't, and we talked about it then, only speculating. Could this be a situation that maybe benefits LSU? Now I think we know it to be fact, or at least we'll see it to play out that way, because you've got to think, we've seen Coy Moore enter the transfer portal now. I think you could also point to that and say he was a sophomore wide receiver in a deep room that was, not playing as much even as he did a year ago, because they're playing all these other freshmen, and that might not have much to do with the coaching staff or their status. And I wouldn't be able to argue much against that, but I don't think that'll be the end of it. So here's the key. The December signing period, December 15th is when the clock begins, or when your fall semester ends. So I think that would probably come first for LSU. It's guys who leave after that, and you can up to 7 guys then replace those. So even right now, you're not able to replace a Coy Moore instantly. That clock doesn't start for about another month and a half after the season. But from there, you can truly rebuild the roster in a way of a new staff coming in and saying, look, here's the weak spots, and we may have a relationship with this guy who's here that's in the portal. Or, this guy, we saw it with Jay Johnson. Baseball's not the same at all. They have different scholarship rules, but, they have a guy or two in their program that says, hey, I'm going to transfer to LSU now because my coach is there. And you can rebuild it that way, and maybe we see that pay off in recruiting as well, right? So I think in terms of high school prospects and the 25 limit, that maybe you could get some guys you might not have been expecting to get previously because of some new ties that staff has. But I'm with you in thinking that the transfer portal in these 7 spots, I think, will be really, really key. And I think that they'll be able to get to that full 7 just between natural attrition of guys transferring out and then a coaching change, that you're going to really be able to say, hey, look back and hope to say at least 1, 2, 3. I'm counting the starters that they brought, out of left field in the transfer portal onto this roster and then onto the field a year from now. That's almost got to be the goal for you.
We appreciate it as always, Shea. Thanks, man.
All right. I appreciate it. Thanks, Matt.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.